Kevin Mitnick was once known as the world's most wanted social engineer and computer hacker. One doesn't acquire a title like that, nor an accompanying prison sentence, for simple exploits. He brought down some of the biggest companies and government organisations in the world. But in the end, his life of crime caught up to him and he was sent to prison for 5 years. Today, we're learning how the FBI caught the most wanted hacker in history. Mitnick's love for bypassing code began at the early age of 12. His main tools were reported to be social engineering and dumpster diving, which helped him bypass punch card systems used in the Los Angeles bus system. He was said to have convinced the bus driver to tell him where he could buy his ticket punch for a so-called school project. What drew me into hacking was my love for magic, he said.
I was fascinated with magic.
So as a young boy, I used to ride my bicycle over to the magic store after school to watch the salespeople perform these tricks over and over and over again. And then when I ended up in high school, I met this kid who could work magic with a telephone, and he did all these tricks. He was able to get my mum's unlisted telephone number. Following this, he was able to ride any bus in the greater LA area using unused transfer slips he found in a dumpster next to the bus company garage. Social engineering later became his primary method of obtaining information, which included usernames and passwords and modem phone numbers. Mitnick's first unauthorized access to a computer network in 1979 at the age of 16 gave him access to the Digital Equipment Corporation computer system. He was reported to have broken into DEC's computer network and later cloned their software. This was one of the few and early crimes he was charged and convicted of in the year of 1988. Following his conviction, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison, which was followed by 3 years of released supervision by authorities. Near the end of his supervised release, Mitnick was recorded to have hacked into the Pacific Bell voicemail computers and was now really playing with fire. This was enough for officials to release an arrest warrant which had Mitnick fleeing from authorities and becoming a fugitive for about 2.5 years. But despite Mitnick's desire to keep a low profile and his ethos of hacking systems for the pursuit of knowledge and adventure and not for personal profit, he was labelled as the bad guy. In a book published in 1995, Cyberpunk, Outlaws and Hackers on the Computer Frontier, authors Hafner and Markov labelled Mitnick as a dark side hacker. Afterward, USA Today published a picture of Mitnick's face superimposed over an image of Darth Vader. This was when he became the FBI's most wanted. Many people believe the FBI was most scared because the agency had a poor understanding of the way computers worked. They felt vulnerable and decided to take out the threat. Mitnick was holed up in Denver, Colorado at the time. He liked it because it felt remote in the mountains, but law enforcement was breathing down his neck the whole time. I just started creating resumes and looking at newspapers. I'd tailor my background to match 90% of what they were looking for, he said, referencing the new identity he made for himself. I'd give my own references. It wasn't hard. I created my own past. Mitnick was conscious not to make any good friends or date because his picture was all over the news. He had favourite bars and restaurants, but he was never overly friendly with other patrons, so they would not identify him. Known for being overweight, Mitnick started hitting the gym every day in order to change his look and body type. He even put painful rocks in his shoes in order to change his gait. It's the number one way you can be recognised, said Mitnick, who spent evenings hacking. I just took it day by day. Looking over your shoulder was no way to live. I treated it like I wasn't even on the run. And when I treated it like that, I didn't have that stress. Cops would drive by and I'd be like, hi, I didn't care. It wasn't like my picture was all over the news or on America's Most Wanted, he said. Once I got on the front page of the New York Times, I became a very high priority. They used a bad photo that made me look evil and grimacing. So I go, that's great, I look totally different. After growing tired of Denver, Mitnick became Brian Merrill and moved to Seattle, where he worked at a tech firm. From here, Kevin made a powerful enemy that ultimately led to his capture, Tsutomu Shimomura. It was a bold move because Shimomura was a respected security expert and a character almost as complex as Mitnick. A 30-year-old science geek, Shimomura was also a Japanese citizen, a ski bum, a long-haired computational physicist, and a hacker himself. But unlike Mitnick, every time Shimomura's explorations uncovered security holes, he reported them to security authorities, not to hackers. So, in December 1994, when someone broke into Tsutomu Shimomura's elaborate computer system in his San Diego home using a never-before-seen, sophisticated hacking method and then stole some fancy cellular phone tools, Shimomura took it as a personal challenge. When the trail led to Mitnick, Shimomura became a cyber sleuth on a mission to catch Kevin. From the 1970s up until his last arrest in 1995, Kevin Mitnick skillfully eluded and bypassed corporate security safeguards, penetrating some of the most well-guarded systems, including, amongst countless others, the likes of Sun Microsystems, Digital Equipment Corporation, Motorola, Netcom and Nokia. He has even had to go on record and deny hacking into the Department of Defense's North American Aerospace Defense Command and wiretapping the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A 1994 New York Times profile breathlessly described him as having hacked into computers at the North American Air Defense Command as a teenager. It wasn't true, but it became part of his legend. The FBI, with the cooperation and technical support of Shimomura, finally tracked him down in Raleigh, California. He was found with cloned cellular phones, more than 100 cloned cellular phone codes, and multiple pieces of false identification. In 1999, as part of a deal, he pled guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of computer fraud, and 1 count of illegally intercepting communications. All told, he spent 5 years in federal prison ending in 2000. He was even forced to spend 8 months in solitary confinement because the guards were convinced he could control the computer systems around the jail. He was released on January 21, 2000. During his supervised release, which ended on January 21, 2003, he was initially forbidden to use any communications technology other than a landline telephone. Mitnick fought this decision in court, eventually winning a ruling in his favour, allowing him to access the internet. Under the plea deal, Mitnick was also prohibited from profiting from films or books based on his criminal activity for 7 years. In December 2002, an FCC judge ruled that Mitnick was mentally stable and well enough to possess a federally issued amateur radio license. Today, Kevin Mitnick runs a successful security company called Mitnick Security. His global ghost teams test for weaknesses in company security by trying to hack them, ironically using all of the skills he learned as a black hat hacker. Clearly, extremely intelligent and skilled at his job, Mitnick has written 3 books and has largely defined what we know today about social engineering. Social engineering, the practice of obtaining information such as passwords from people by deception and other means, is still the predominant means by which hackers gain access to systems. My primary business is doing penetration testing, he said. We test the physical security, the technical security, the people. We test their wireless networks, their VoIP phones. We test everything across the board to look for vulnerabilities so our clients can fix them. By testing, Mitnick means accepting a large fee, he didn't say how much, to do to these companies exactly what landed him in prison 2 decades ago: gain entry to their computers, their networks, their phones, and even their buildings by any means necessary without being detected, and then to report back on how he did it. And here's probably the most interesting fact. Mitnick and his constantly changing team of specialty hackers have a 100% success rate. That's no legend. It's not even bragging, he said. It's just a fact. Today, Mitnick says that although there are more ways of hacking into people's accounts and accessing private information, the number one way in which the bad guys get in has stayed the same since the 70s, through talking people into giving up private information. He calls this technique social engineering. Social engineering is using manipulation, deception, and influence to get a target to comply with the request, usually to give information or to click on an attachment in an email. And once the victim opens up the attachment and follows the instructions of the attacker, the computer is compromised. On most of his jobs, Mitnick is asked to attack not only a company's computers, but also to fool its employees into letting him walk right into places from which he would otherwise be locked out. These social engineering attacks amount to tricking someone with access to a computer or a building or some other asset to give up information. Hacking humans is easier than hacking computers. The most effective way to carry out an attack is to get the client, a person, to do something stupid, he said. And as the old saying goes, there's no cure for stupid. So, even though he was once demonized by the government and big business, Mitnick has turned into a sort of altruistic hacker, tearing security systems apart in order to reveal important vulnerabilities in code. Now that he has paid his dues sitting in jail, Kevin Mitnick is one of the most celebrated hackers of all time.